3 p.m. walking home from middle school. I was 12 years old, circa 2002, and I was walking home alone from school around 3 p.m. It was sunny and bright, and I had no reason to think that my walk home was going to be any different than it ever had been. I lived about 1 mile away from my middle school. The way home was very safe. I knew about 10 people who lived along the way, and there were many mom and pop shops that peppered the path home. It was also a broad daylight on a somewhat crowded street for a beach town suburb. I just passed an insurance office and convenience store when I noticed a homeless man on the corner. This wasn't rare for my part of town, where many aging hippies and burnouts live by the shore and ask for handouts during the day. 90% of these men are harmless. They don't even yell. They just ask for change and shrug if you say no. So, being naive and used to my safe walk home, I paid no attention to the man other than to utter a soft casual hello as I walked by. He didn't seem to hear me. As I'm walking by and up the hill behind him, I hear footsteps behind me and guttural ramblings. It sounded like he was trying to get my attention, but I knew enough not to engage him. I had no money and he seemed drunk. I quickened my pace. My heart rate went up from fear, but I had hoped that my speed would deter him. I was already at least 50 feet in front of him uphill, but he was only going faster. Finally, I was at a jog and he was catching up. I had a heavy backpack and sandals, so I couldn't run. He grabbed my arm and spun me around. I could smell weed and alcohol on his breath. He pushed me into the bushes by an apartment complex, and right before he was going to lean in, a car screeched by on the curb and yelled, "Get off!" He got up, confused, and I took the moment of respite to get out of the bushes and run to the curb. The woman behind the wheel opened her passenger door and asked me to get inside. "I'm not going to hurt you, I promise. Just get you away from that creep." I got in. She sped off and told me to call the police as soon as I got home. My mom wouldn't be home until 7 p.m., so all I could do was tell my neighbor, whom we were supposed to go tell if anything happened, and call. The dispatcher took down all of my information pretty easily. I was so shocked and full of adrenaline, I hadn't cried or broken down yet. It almost felt like I was watching everything happen. About an hour later, I got a call back from the police telling me that they had found the guy who attacked me and asked if they could come by my house to get my statement. I said I'd have to wait until my mom came home from picking up my sister, but really from her job 1 hour away. They said I could wait until the next day. He was probably in the drunk tank. The man they caught was a notorious drunk around the area. He had been mostly harmless, but recently had gone into harder drugs like crystal meth, which had caused him to get more violent and commit petty thefts around the neighborhood. This was the first time he had tried anything dangerous. So, about a year later, I saw his name pop up in our local police blotter. He had been arrested for rape. My encounter with a pervert. When I was younger, I lived in a community nicknamed The Bubble because there was virtually no crime, and we were raised very sheltered. The elementary school I went to was a walking school, which meant all the kids lived within a mile of the school, and there were no buses. We all had to walk home or get picked up. One day, when I was in 5th or 6th grade, my mom gets a call from one of the other parents on the phone tree warning parents that a man in a car exposed himself to a girl walking home, and recommends carpools or walking home with your child after school for a while. I go to school the next day and find out that it's one of my best friends, Allie, who he showed his penis to. She told me he called to her and said, "Hey girl, look at this." And when she looked in his car, he had his dick and balls in his hand. We are too innocent to realize this guy was seriously demented and just forgot about it. It's springtime, and we all want to walk home. We don't need to be picked up because we're very brave and filled with attitude after all. So, a couple days later, me and a few of my best friends walk home from school and are playing wall ball against Allie's garage. We notice a car drive by a few times, and then Allie realizes it's the man who exposed himself to her, and now he knows where she lives. She runs in to tell her parents, who are Armenian and very intimidating. Her dad jumps in his car and races after the guy. Her mom calls the police, while his dad has a full-on car chase with this guy, driving up onto the sidewalks and getting on the highway and everything like that. Now, I don't exactly remember if her dad caught him or if the police did, but I had memorized the license plate with a little song the last time I saw it drive by, so I know they found him in the end. My dad drove me by a house that was only 2 blocks away from mine a couple days later and told me that was the pervert's house. He also told me that he had one of our family friends knock some sense into him. And I never heard anything about it after that ever again. The faceless driver. I was in about the 4th or 5th grade, and finally old enough to walk home by myself from the school like a big kid. It wasn't a very long path, but I felt a sense of pride in it, as if every single one of those footsteps were tiny bridges bringing me closer and closer to my ultimate independence. Looking back now, it's eerie to think how close my first steps of freedom were to making me run for my life. It was the mid-90s, and we had just moved to Miami, Florida. Shortly after we got there, news broke out over an abduction, rape, and murder of a boy only a grade older than me. His name was Jimmy Rice. It was the first time I learned that there were bad people around who did bad things. I'll never forget how much my parents and my teachers stressed me not to talk to strangers, how to dial 911 and other hints, tips, and tricks to keep me safe after that. I think it's safe to say I was a bit more cautious and aware of my surroundings than I would have been otherwise had it not been for Jimmy. Well, on this particular day, when I was walking down the avenue home from school, I noticed something strange that caught my attention. The same old junky car sitting at the stop sign in front of me was sitting at the last 2 stop signs behind me. As soon as I would cross the street in front of the car, the driver would zip around and the block and be at the next stop sign once again, waiting for me to cross the road. But after about 3 more blocks of this, I turned down the last street to my house, and he drove away. I remember thinking it was weird, but I figured that he must have been lost or something. Just a strange coincidence. I didn't think too much about it after that. Fast forward a few weeks later, and it's Friday. I'm super excited for the weekend, and my best friend Louise is walking home with me so we can play video games and watch movies after school. Well, as we're walking home together, I notice that same old junky car pull up to the stop sign. Words cannot begin to describe the speed at which my brain recalculated the previous event, which I had almost forgotten, and refilled the thoughts I harbored of him probably being lost, and replaced them with the "oh my god," as I realized I was probably being targeted by this person. As soon as I noticed him, I tried to play it cool. I didn't want him to read my face. I told Louise not to look, but gave him the rundown that the same car ahead of us at the stop sign had followed me one time when I was walking home, and that we needed to make a plan. As we crossed the street, I tried to nonchalantly draw my eyes over to the driver's seat to see the face of the man inside the car, but his tints were so strong that I couldn't see anything but the silhouette of a man facing directly at me. I've read a few times before that when someone points a gun at you and you're in their crosshairs, your body can somehow sense it, even miles away. I suppose it's the same way you can feel it when a person is looking at you inside a room. Now, I don't think this person had a gun pointed at me, but my body could feel his eyes watching me while I crossed the road in a way that gave me a terribly uneasy feeling. The only way to describe it was feeling like a big, hungry alligator was really mad at me, and I didn't know why. My skin was crawling as he turned around the street and pulled up again in front of the next stop sign. I could tell by the way he drove that his attitude was different this time. The first time, it seemed like he was trying to just blend in, but this time, I think he knew that I knew what was happening, and he drove with more bravado and would inch the car closer to us at the stop sign to intimidate us, whereas before he would stay fairly well behind the white line. It felt like he was getting himself pumped up for something. We were totally freaked out, but we were still trying our hardest to play it cool and act like we didn't notice, while he drove around the block to meet us at the stop sign at the street my house was on. We planned to write his license plate numbers down. As the car pulled up to the stop sign, we made a right instead of crossing him, and Louise pulled the pencil and paper out of his backpack, and I read him the plate numbers real quick. He definitely noticed what was going on, because he peeled away from the stop sign to go back around the block again. At this point, he wasn't even trying to hide it anymore. It was time to run. As soon as he turned the corner, we bolted all the way to my house as fast as we could move. I don't know if I said anything to Louise, or if we were communicating telepathically to each other, but somehow we both knew we had to get inside my house before he could see which house we were going to. Anyways, I'll never forget this, but as soon as we were finished crossing the final street 2 houses from my house, I looked down the road to see if he was there, and I saw him turn a sharp corner super fast, about 300 feet away, and just saw him flooring the car so he could intercept us. Before that moment, I had only seen him pulling up to the stop sign, but this time, I was seeing just how aggressively he was actually pursuing us, and it was scary as fuck. Luckily enough, we were fast and able to unlock the door and get inside just before he pulled down our street. I stared out the peephole and watched his car slowly drive around a few times before he finally disappeared. I called my mom and told her to come home because we just got chased by some weird man, and she rushed home and we told her everything. Thankfully, my mother works in corrections, and as soon as we told her the story and that we had his license plate numbers, she was able to send a few police officers she worked with over to visit the guy. I don't know if I'll ever really know what happened, but she told me that the cops found the location of the owner of the vehicle and decided to go have a chat with him off the record. I didn't know it at the time, but I found out years later that she went with them. She said he was some 30-something-year-old guy living with his parents, and that he denied everything, and his parents were surprised, but that the cops thought he was a friggin' weirdo, and didn't believe anything he said. They told him they were going to be watching him, 'cause they know what he was doing, and that if I ever saw him again, they were gonna personally come back for him, and they scared the shit out of him. I never saw him again. Ronnie 7. Sorry it's so long. Worth it, I promise. 4 years ago, I was a freshman girl in high school. My house was about 8 blocks from the metro bus stop, and every time I came home from school, I would walk down the same street, same time. 6 months into the school year, I'm walking home one day when a car stops by the sidewalk and the driver rolls down his window. Do you know where St. John's University is? Balding, blue eyes, chubby, in his 50s. Of course, it's about 5 blocks down that way. I pointed to my left. You see those football stadium lights? There. I stay on the sidewalk. He looks over. Yeah, I do. Thanks. Yeah, no problem. I watch him drive away, noting how bright his taillights are. It wasn't until later that I realized his car was on the wrong side of the road. The cars down my side of the sidewalk should have been facing me. For the next few months, I always got the feeling that I kept seeing that same car over and over again, every few weeks. When I'm halfway down the block to my house, a car would drive past me and stop at the end of the block, presumably for the stop sign. I would glance at the back of the car and wonder why cars in my neighborhood all look the same. I paid it no mind. 2 months into my sophomore year, it was a rainy afternoon. I was walking home with my hood up, halfway down the block of my house, and a car stops next to me again. Do you know where Union Turnpike is? Yeah, you're gonna have to turn right at the block ahead and make a left. What? Go left? No, you can't because next block's a one-way. Wait, what? Is this guy dense? I walk closer to his car, thinking he couldn't hear me over the rain, and go up to his window. You have to drive down the street ahead first before you can make a left, and just keep going down until you reach you. And for some reason, I happened to glance down at his lap. His pants were unzipped, and his hand was holding his erect member, stroking up and down, up and down. Look back up. His blue eyes are staring right at me. Just the most nonchalant expression, except for that piercing stare. I freeze. Pretend I didn't see it. Yeah, just that way. Sped walked the fuck to my house. My dad was home early that day, and happened to look out the window as I was walking home, and saw the whole ordeal. He took a look at my face when I shut the front door and asked, "Hey, what happened? That car was weird. It was on the wrong side of the road." Dad. I told him. He flew into a rage and jumped into his car intending to find the guy. He said he recognized the build. It's a Ford Explorer. He drove around the whole neighborhood and came back with no results. My parents urged me to file a police report. Besides being a little startled and shaken, I thought nothing of it. Being a girl in New York City, you tend to meet tons of creepy people. It's no big deal, I said. I bet the police get this all the time anyways. Flashers everywhere, I said. But sometimes, I would still think of it and get all indignant, thinking I should have confronted him and yelled instead of just looking away. 2 years later, I was then a senior nearing graduation. I'm a big girl now. I get home early from classes to go pick up my little sister from elementary school, holding her tiny hands and having her talking about her day. Halfway down the block from my house is when that car pulls up again. I tense up. I recognize it. Hey, do you know? No. I stare right at him and said it loudly, firmly, with my little sister right next to me. I couldn't say anything that was racing through my mind, afraid of scaring her. How dare you? How fucking dare you? I am with a little child, and there is no way in hell you're getting near her. Do you think I wouldn't remember you? You think I'd stay quiet and walk away again while you're off scaring girls? No, I didn't say that, no. He looked startled. He drove off without a word. I looked at his license plate. Ronnie 7. Dark blue Ford Explorer. Got you, motherfucker. I put all the pieces together and realized this man had been stalking me for 4 years. He knew where I walked, when I get home, and he knew where my house is. I went straight to the police and reported everything. About 2 months later, I get off the city bus, crossed the intersection, and was about to walk down the same way to my house when I stopped, dead in my tracks. Ronnie 7. Only this time, it's cream-colored and parked in front of a house. A house I would walk past every single day. I don't know what the police did with my report. I don't know if they ever gave him a warning or gave him time. But I still walk past this house. I still see his car. I know his intent was never to harm or kidnap, but to merely scare. There are people like him who target young girls and gets off on startling them and feeling big and powerful. I've seen him one more time since then, walking past this house, and he was on his balcony. I paused a little, stared right at him, and maintained eye contact. I dare you. He looked away.